know the true history of this great city. It starts over 1,000 years ago, when the North was truly what Southerners call the Savage North. In those days, most of these parts were covered with vast, tall forests of ancient green and inhabited by dwarves, goblin-kind, and elves. A few humans lived along the Sword Coast, fishing, hunting. They gathered in the spring and fall to trade furs with merchants sailing from the south. These vessels came primarily to cut and take huge trees for shipbuilding, trees being no longer available in such large sizes down farther south. Most of the trade moutes were at places where there was a natural deep-water harbor, an arm of an isolated coastal crag, or a rocky island beyond it. Over the years, the forest was cut back from the shore, and tribes began to stay there, farming the cleared land. The wiser among them claimed some of the timber, so to trade for more weapons and tools. These claims angered others, who found the squatters wealthy from frequent trade, and, like many before them, decided to slaughter them and steal their riches. Especially brutal were the tribes that were led by Nemoar, a chieftain who ordered his clan to seize everything built around the bay. They settled there themselves and erected a log palisade for protection. Several pirates and other barbarians tried to attack Nemoar's hold, but he beat them back without a thought, and the fledgling town prospered. At this point, people started to call the place the town of Waterdeep. At the time, in the north, orc tribes had outgrown their territory and they spread out over the land. South and down from the mountains they came, hurling endless numbers against all who stood in their way. Here and there, elven enclaves held out, but the push southward displaced many other northern folk. Most notably were the everlasting ones who came down into the cleared lands northeast of Nemoar's hold, what we today call the Trollmoors. Nemoar died of old age when this all happened, and younger warlords led the men of Waterdeep in battles against the trolls. There were many bloody struggles between men and trolls until the magic of the northern youth named Agaron turned the tide. Agaron rose in skill and power with the passage of the years, and soon became a great mage. I think he must have found a supply of youth potions, for he lived on, still a man in his prime, for decades. It was also now that we took the first step towards building Castle Waterdeep. The warlords set up a keep above on the slopes of Mount Waterdeep to protect the farmers from troll attacks. Many folk who had come to Waterdeep for protection from the trolls stayed and expanded the walls with new farms. By this time, the city had officially been renamed to the Free City of Waterdeep and was ruled by a handful of warlords. Much like Sembia, the power eventually shifted from the warlords to the merchants. But unlike Sembia, these merchants and guildmasters were unable to agree on how to rule the city. Groups of bodyguards appeared openly armed on the streets while walking with their masters. Murder and foul play continued until, at last, they agreed that all masters should rule Waterdeep together in a council. Lesser nobles and many townsfolk protested. They wanted the lords to rule by right and by the people's consent. The guildmasters brushed this away and said that the lords had not been seen since Agaron's death. They claimed that any previous lords must have been golems controlled by the mage to conceal his dictatorship. But I'll tell you in truth, the lords were real men and women. The guildmasters had been hunting down any lords they could find and eliminating them in preparation for a coup. The only two lords to survive this purge were Faerûn, a woodworker, and Shalom, an apprentice wizard. These two kept very quiet and waited. Once the guildmasters thought all the living lords of the city had been eliminated, they took a firmer rule over Waterdeep. They ruled for only 6 years, but then their squabbling led to bloodshed. A few murders quickly erupted into a vicious series of street fights and midnight attacks. We call this time the Guild Wars, and it left all but 2 guildmasters dead. It also took out most of our city's best minds, wasted the city's gold. The only guildmasters to survive after the Guild Wars were Lohar Gildech of the Shipwrights and Elam Zoar of the Gem Cutters. These 2, ruthless manipulators both, were well matched. They could not overcome each other, though their private armies fought in the streets. After a while, they sickened of bloodshed. Many from both families were dead, and they equally were losing profits. They came to an agreement to rule together. 2 thrones were set up in Castle Waterdeep, but these men were not agreeable on anything. Bickering and fighting often erupted between them. All matters, including the recognition of new guildmasters to rule the headless guilds, had to come before the 2 Lords Magister, but few matters were settled. It was at this time that Faerûn and Shalom saw their opportunity. One day, to the courts of the Lord Magister came 2 people masked and robed as the Lords of Waterdeep of old. Whence they came, no one knew, but they appeared in the castle's great hall where the courts were gathered, and commanded the Lords Magister to leave the city. Laughing, the lords refused, whereupon the shorter of the masked intruders blasted them both with lightning and fire. Their very thrones were shattered. The taller of the intruders then called for the heads of all the noble houses to come to them by nightfall, or leave the city forever. Everyone in the courts heard, and the news was cried out in the streets. The surviving nobles came, reluctantly and with bodyguards, expecting a trap. Faerûn spoke to the nobles and the crowd of townsfolk that had also come, saying, "This must not happen again. If Waterdeep is to be safe, all must support what I and my fellow lord now plan." He removed his mask and said, "I am Faerûn. I would be safe in this my city again." Shalom, still masked, commanded that the 2 houses of the guildmasters be outcast and to never set foot again in Waterdeep. After this, peace returned to the city, and Waterdavians went back to their labors. To prevent discovery of who the lords were, Faerûn selected certain men of character and appointed them magisters under the lords. These men were to judge and apply the laws of Waterdeep in daily affairs. Waterdeep paid these men well in order to avoid temptation. Before the Lord's court, Faerûn encouraged folk to speak freely for the length of a short candle's burning, without fear of chastisement or reproach. They would be heard as long as they spoke openly and answered questions or opposing views put to them while there. With this idea, just grievances of folk would be heard, no matter how small the matter or lowly the speaker. And so it was, slow to take hold until people knew it for careful justice, but enduring beyond Faerûn's time and up until this day. With the passing years, Waterdeep has grown and become more varied, flourishing with good trade and under the tolerance and protection of strong defenders and good governance. Over the years, the city has seen problems from many sides. The Gods' War was a major disturbance to the city. A green dragon assailed the fields of Triumph. The giants ravaged the north. But despite these hardships, the city and her people have survived and grown stronger. The Lord's Alliance continues to provide safety for all the settlements of the northern Sword Coast and for those inland. Though some say it can be matched in size or commerce, there is no city in the realms that compares to the sheer variety of life, tastes, and experiences found in fair Waterdeep, the City of Splendors, Crown of the North.